I'm Aidan. I'm trained as an architect. I have a master's in futures design and I'm a strategic innovation lead working at Accenture the Dock. And my talk today is about education, design and the future. The climate crisis, biodiversity loss, the loss of trust in our institutions and organisations, the breakdown of the social contract. It'd be fair to say that whatever it was we've been up to as a society for the last number of years, we're facing a whole interwoven set of challenges. Around the early 1900s, Western society started to move towards a modern one. The breakdown of traditional social values and social structures, and faith being placed more in progress and for science and technology. At that exact same time, industrialization started to arrive, and with it the linear consumption model of take, make and dispose. And fundamental to all of this was the idea of reductionism. Essentially, reductionism tried to oversimplify the complexity of human life and the environments around us, and that was seen none more so than on the production lines in factories. Essentially, these factories were about trying to control the efficiency and productivity, and ultimately profit of a much wider world. Essentially, what we were doing was turning environments and ecosystems into resources to be exploited, again for profit. And with any new type of innovation or move in society, we had to have a labour force that were trained in these principles. So what we used was the reductionist industrial model to try and produce industrialists and engineers, but because it was a one-size-fits-all model, we as a society and generation after generation were also educated in a similar way. Even if you think about the classrooms and the way they were even laid out, lines and lines, rows and rows of students facing one direction, all learning about the same thing, all absorbing answers and giving answers in the same sort of way, time and time again. That system prized compliance and conformity and rejected the idea of critical thinking and rejected the idea of creativity. Now, those of us with a design background and design education know that potentially the world can be different and education can be different. Take just say the idea of a brief. We all know that a brief is a general challenge around which we need to ideate on, maybe reframe or totally rip up. It's the area that we just begin to think about where the actual challenge might sit and begin to actually understand, well, what's the real challenge we're trying to solve for? It's in this space that I believe that not just the future of education or society, but the future itself actually sits. Around 1919, in the aftermath of World War I, with Europe still reeling from the war, the Bauhaus became central and core to how not just design education was being thought about, but design's role in society more broadly. And yes, the Bauhaus was about producing designers, and it was about producing a new type of designer, but it was also about trying to produce designers who thought in a new type of way. So, yes, they must design aesthetically pleasing objects, but think about the social ramifications upon which your objects will actually begin to sit into. And central and core to the whole approach to the Bauhaus was the curriculum. It was a 3-year course where you had to establish a worldview on what it was that you were contributing to more societally, begin to engage with and understand the nature and society more broadly, and eventually begin to produce an artifact, an object, a building that sat in the world more broadly, but answered something more bigger. I know now possibly you can accuse me of an oversimplistic or reductionist way of thinking about the challenges we're now facing, but where I'd like to go next is through the idea of integral theory or integral design. Integral design is essentially a developmental model that kind of posits taking the best of what we currently have and building it forward. I know that the world we live in now has some great aspects to it, but essentially we are on a downward spiral that has already been spoken about even tonight. So what am I essentially producing or proposing? I'd like us to think about the challenges more holistically in a much broader sense and think about the system that we're actually operating in, and to take some inspiration from the founders of the Bauhaus, the architects and designers back in the day, and think maybe that the challenges aren't just thinking about products or aren't thinking about society, but there's also a mindsets piece that we need to consider. There's also reflection and feedback, human psychology, the cognitive behavioral models that underpin not just how designers think, but how society thinks more broadly, as well as thinking about the circular business models. Why? Essentially, we are on a Horizon 1 path to destruction, and we need to think about what a Horizon 3 path might look like to try and give us a realistic chance at living and thriving in the future. The one thing I'd like to just leave you with is just to think about design has a massive role to play in society, and I believe that the challenges of the future are all interwoven and interconnected, so why not respond in a way with the design curriculum that is also interwoven and interconnected? Thanks.